I'll announce today's keynote speaker, Professor Jay Bolter. But before that, let me make a few announcements as usual. We have a screening, Thursday Club Show Reel, right after the keynote here, running between 11:45 to 12:15 for 25 minutes. And we also have another screening titled Films, Videos and New Media, a Canadian Overview by Melanie Pandlowski between 4 to 5 at Sabancı University Karaköy Communication Center. And we have two very important meetings which we would like to invite all of you. One of them is ICEA General Meeting and the other is ICEA Future Forum. ICEA General Meeting will be taking place here at the main theater between 2:45 to 4:45. ICEA Foundation and Headquarters invites delegates to our annual meeting where we update on current activities plus presentations from ICEA 2012 and ICEA 2013. Bidding organizations of ICEA 2014, Vancouver and Dubai will also outline their proposals. And ICEA Future Forum, which takes place right after, is between 5 to 6:40, again in this room. And you're invited to join ICEA Foundation Board and Headquarters with special guests to discuss future directions of ICEA. Informal conversations with the participation of delegates will take place. And we are happy to have Jay Bolter today as our keynote speaker. He's the director of Wesley New Media Center and Wesley Chair of New Media at Georgia Institute of Technology. He's the author of several well-known books, among them are Turing's Man, Western Culture in the Computer Age, published in 1984, Writing Space, the Computer, Hypertext and the History of Writing, published in 1991, Remediation, published in 1999 with Richard Grusin, and Windows and Mirrors, published in 2003 with Diana Gromova. Today, Professor Bolter will be making a presentation titled The Digital Plenitude at the End of Art, all in small caps except for the word art. So, Jay, thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for that introduction. I suspect when you look at the title of my talk, your first reaction will be, oh no, not the end of art again. That's so 1980s and 1990s. In defense, I point to the full title. I want to talk about the idea of the end of art, which has indeed been with us for some time, in the context of digital media. How does it change? How is it affected? Because something has changed over the past 2 decades, not only with digital media, but cultural changes of which the digital media revolution is itself a part. By the end of the presentation, you may also be likely to ask, where's the digital art in this talk? Well, there's not much here, actually. That art is all around us at the exhibitions. I'm going to reflect on the historical context for that art and its cultural status today. Another caveat to start. I will offer necessarily an American perspective. The situation may well be different here in Turkey, in Europe and other developed countries in Asia, in developing countries. Those differences are definitely worth exploring, but I will not be able to do so this morning. But I do want to begin by reminding you of some obvious characteristics of our media culture, which apply to the whole of the developed world and are not particular to the United States. First, it's hard to write about the size and scope of our current media culture without superlatives. Traditional television and film still have audiences in the hundreds of millions, sometimes billions, as in the Olympics. And the newer participatory digital media have now reached comparable levels. A survey of the internet in 2010, therefore already outdated, put the number of internet users at almost 2 billion. That's an American billion. 2,000 million, but nevertheless, a percentage of the Earth's population that is incomparably and incomprehensibly large. The number of websites was put at 255 million. The number of Facebook users at 600 million, or is it 700 million? And you can see some of the other figures here for social media. The number of blogs at over 150 million. 2010 saw 25 billion tweets on the microblogging site Twitter. 35 hours of video were uploaded to YouTube every minute. 2 billion YouTube videos were viewed during 2010. 36 billion photos were uploaded to Facebook that year. Both in absolute numbers and in rates of participation, more people in the developed countries of North America, Europe, and Asia are publishing or communicating in digital form than was ever the case in print. The condition of media culture today is what I would call a plenitude, an abundance that easily accommodates, indeed swallows up, the contradictory forces of high and popular culture, old and new media, while at the same time allowing for a redefinition, or indeed many redefinitions of creativity, art, and knowledge. Here is an image that is for me an attempt to make sense of the plenitude, a map that purports to show all the Facebook friendships as links between locations. The Facebook links themselves define the shapes of continents and countries and suggest how strong a force new media may be, how massive the connections are. But even this gives us too much sense of order. That a visualization could make sense of at all, this massive number. And in fact, I really prefer this visualization of the millions and millions of IP addresses on the internet by Barrett Lyon, with special coloring to indicate size and speed. It is beautiful and impressive. Indeed, the visualization has been on display at MoMA. Quite obviously, it makes the internet look like a portion of the sky photographed by a telescope and then enhanced with false colors. What it reveals, most of all, is the enormity of the internet. Its beauty coming from, and yet, in a sense, masking the complexity of the whole. And when we realize that this image represents internet connections, I can't help but think of William Gibson's definition of cyberspace, a consensual hallucination experienced daily by billions of legitimate operators in every nation, by children being taught mathematical concepts, a graphical representation of data abstracted from the banks of every computer in the human system, unthinkable complexity, lines of light ranged in the non-space of the mind, clusters and constellations of data. Gibson was writing 25 years ago, before the World Wide Web and the explosion of websites and then social media. The situation today is, in some sense, much closer to the complexity of cyberspace that he anticipated, but in other ways not. In particular, cyberspace is not separated from our embodied cultural life, but very much a part of it. In fact, media culture today encompasses all the old and new media, analog and digital, physical and virtual. Again, when I say that our media culture is a plenitude, I mean that it is a universe so vast, varied, and dynamic that it is incomprehensible as a whole. But most writers on media culture today don't acknowledge this. They still seek to offer us a more or less comprehensive story about the state of our culture. To push my metaphor a bit further, cyberspace, indeed our whole media culture, is like the universe of the Big Bang Theory. It is expanding in all directions so that every point can appear to be the center. And every digital writer seems to assume that he or she is standing at that center with a privileged view. In the United States, popular writers on the media revolution tend, of course, to be either enthusiasts or critics, as they focus on the features of the plenitude from their own perspective. The same features that the enthusiasts see as a great gain, the vast scale of participation, the rise of amateur or do-it-yourself production, the absence of gatekeepers in social media, appear to others as the loss of culture itself. The enthusiast Clay Shirky claims, for example, that social media can release the creative energy of the whole planet. The skeptic Andrew Keen claims that these tens of thousands of YouTube videos and hundreds of millions of Facebook pages are trivial and repetitive. Their disagreement in looking at the same phenomenon suggests that we have reached an inflection point in which the direction of our culture is changing. Central cultural assumptions of the past 100 years are no longer sustainable. The skeptics insist on evaluating our media culture by those older assumptions, while the enthusiasts, who talk endlessly about the new, do not always realize the consequences of rejecting those assumptions. The coming of new digital media, such as social media and video games, is not in itself the cause of this shift, which goes back further in the 20th century. Beginning in about 1960 in North America and Europe, or perhaps even earlier in the 1940s, there's been a great, though gradual change in cultural values, a breaking down of the distinction between high and popular culture. What was regarded as elite culture, art, literature, classical music, and indeed the humanities, the academic humanities that study these, in the first half of the 20th century, lost its special status in the second half, as elements of popular culture, film, popular music, fan culture, etc., gained in importance. This is something that we all know, that we all grew up with. The key result, confirmed now in the 21st century in the digital plenitude, is the loss of an agreed-on cultural center. Elite culture is no longer central, but elite culture has not been replaced at the center by any forms of popular culture. Instead, almost any form or practice can serve as a center for a larger or smaller community of patrons or users. Now, some of these communities are enormous. The YouTube video of Justin Bieber's song Baby has had over 620 million views. That's far more than the population of the United States or even the European Union, and 180,000 times as many as a video of Leonard Bernstein performing an excerpt of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. The size of the community matters, of course, for its economic power, but not for its cultural claim to centrality. In 1976, cartoonist Saul Steinberg created a classic cover for the New Yorker magazine depicting a Manhattanite's view of the world. I'm sure you've all seen this. In the foreground, 9th and 10th Avenues are drawn in detail. As we look west across the Hudson, the American continent recedes into a few major landmarks, while beyond the Pacific, there are thin, colorless blobs for Japan, Russia, and China. The cartoon itself could be an emblem of the loss of high culture that I'm referring to, drawn at a time when New York City had not quite lost its status as the cultural capital of the United States. An endless series of imitations of Steinberg's 9th Avenue cartoon would give us a picture of the media culture in which we now live. Almost every point in that culture, every genre of blog or social media or video remix, every craft or hobby, every manifestation of DIY, every MMO, as well as each of the traditional media, serves as a center for some community of users. For many gamers, for example, video games are at the center of digital culture and the leading edge of our social, political, and creative life. Games are at 9th Avenue, everything else recedes. For millions of bloggers, however, the textual network of blogs, or really some subset of this network of networks, constitutes the center. For the millions in the fan cultures of Star Trek, The Matrix, and Lost, as described by Henry Jenkins, the center lies in the cross-media chains of films and websites and attended events and meetups. For the smaller world of, quote, serious American fiction and print, the center may